The movement of matter within and between ecosystems are known as biogeochemical cycles. These include four cycles: hydrologic, nitrogen, carbon, and phosphorus. The first cycle we'll talk about is the hydrologic cycle. This cycle happens in the atmosphere, the lithosphere, and the hydrosphere. The first step of the hydrologic cycle is evaporation. Sunlight heats up liquid water from the ocean, on the ground, and in the soil, and create water vapors. Solar energy also provides energy for producers to carry out photosynthesis and release water in gas form into the atmosphere. The second step is condensation. When water vapors are lifted higher into the atmosphere, cold air will condense them into clouds. The third step is precipitation. Clouds eventually produce precipitation in the form of rain, snow, and hail. Some of this precipitation falls back on land, some in the ocean. The last step of this cycle is infiltration. Precipitation that falls on land may return to the atmosphere by evaporation, or is taken up by plant roots in the process of transpiration. Water can also be absorbed by the soil and percolate down into groundwater. After this, water can run off across the land surface into water sources like lakes, streams, or the ocean. Humans interfere with the hydrologic cycle by cutting down trees. This may reduce the process of transpiration and evaporation, and also can speed up water runoff. The second cycle we'll talk about is nitrogen cycle. This happens in the atmosphere, the lithosphere, and the hydrosphere. Nitrogen takes up about 78% in the atmosphere. The first step of the nitrogen cycles is nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen in the atmosphere is converted to ammonia by nitrogen-fixing bacteria or by lightning to nitrate. The second step is assimilation. Producer takes up ammonia and nitrate. Consumer assimilate nitrogen by consuming producer. The third step is ammonification. Proteins and other nitrogen-containing compounds are broken down to NH4. This process is carried out by bacteria and decomposers. The fourth step is nitrification. NH4 is converted to NO3 and then to NO2 by nitrifying bacteria. The last step of these cycles is denitrification. NO3 is converted to N2O and eventually to N2 and released to the atmosphere by denitrifying bacteria in oxygen-poor soil. Humans interfere with the nitrogen cycle by burning fossil fuels. This can lead to increased nitrogen in the atmosphere. Also, using fertilizers can increase nitrogen in the lithosphere. The next cycle we will talk about is the carbon cycle. The carbon cycle happens in the atmosphere, the lithosphere, and the hydrosphere. The first step of the carbon cycle is photosynthesis. Sunlight provides energy for producer to convert carbon dioxide into sugar. The second step is respiration. When producer respire, some of the carbon in photosynthesis is released back to the atmosphere. Sugar are converted back to carbon dioxide by this process. The third step of the carbon cycle is exchange. Carbon dioxide is exchanged between the ocean and the atmosphere. The amount of CO2 released from the water into the atmosphere roughly equals to the amount of CO2 from the atmosphere dissolves in the ocean. The first step of the carbon cycle is burial. Organic carbon from dead organisms is buried and precipitated in the ocean. This will eventually form sedimentary rocks. This organic matter will become fossils over a very long period of time. Some of it can be transformed into fossil fuels. The fourth step of the carbon cycles is burial. The small amounts of calcium carbonate sediments from each year will accumulate to produce large carbon pools over millions of years. The fifth step of the carbon cycles is extraction. Humans extract fossil fuels from the ground and from the bottom of the ocean and bring carbon to the Earth's surface for further uses. The last step of the carbon cycle is combustion. Fossil fuels, plants, and other materials are burned and will release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Humans interfere with the carbon cycle by releasing excessive amount of exhaust fumes to traffic and using greenhouse. These two activities release a huge amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and cause global warming and further problems. The last cycle we'll talk about is the phosphorus cycle. These cycles mostly happen in the hydrosphere and the lithosphere. In the first step of the phosphorus cycles, batteries of uplifted rocks contribute to phosphate to the land. Some phosphate make their way back to the ocean. In the second step of the phosphorus cycle, phosphate fertilizer applied to fields can run off directly into stream, become part of a soil pool, or be absorbed by plants. In the third step, excretion by animals and decomposition of both animals and plants in the water and on the ground release phosphate on land or in water. In the fourth step, dissolved phosphate precipitate out of solution and contribute to the ocean sediments. Conversion of sediments into phosphate rock is a very slow process. In the last step of the phosphorus cycle, geologic force can slowly lift up phosphate rocks from the ocean floors to form mountains. Humans interfere with the phosphorus cycles by phosphorus mining and causing algal bloom by excessive use of fertilizer. This creates changes in the phosphorus concentration in the lithosphere and hydrosphere, and this can cause serious problems to organisms living in the two spheres.